med Johannes Larson.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing this morning? Good. All right, we can do a little better than that. How are we doing? Awesome. Oh, well, thank you to Corey, to Tanya, Michelle, Richard, all the staff here, as well as all the other presenters. It's been a great morning so far. Today, I am going to talk about technology, specifically music streaming, and how music streaming can be a tool for local ecosystem development. Give you an idea of what a solution might look like to the current structural issues of the streaming market, and discuss the intersection of music, tech, streaming, and sustainability. So just to start a little bit about myself, I'm a drummer, I'm a music advocate, tech and nonprofit leader. I currently live in the Twin Cities. As Corey mentioned, I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, so about 150 miles south of the Canadian border. We often like to consider ourselves honorary Canadians in Minnesota. I think we would like to be adopted by Canada right now. But yeah, so I was raised in Duluth. I went to college in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown University, where I studied music and computer science. When I was at Georgetown, I was fortunate to meet some great mentors who have worked at the intersection of policy and music for a long time, specifically Michael Bracey, Anna Salenza from the Music Policy Forum. And through the past 3 years, I've been to work with their network, including Ashley Keaton from New Orleans and Kate Becker from Seattle. So if any of those names are familiar to you, I wouldn't be surprised. My main project, which is what I'm here to talk about today, is Campfire, a project that I started as a final project at Georgetown and has since evolved into a nonprofit. I'm also involved with Music Policy Forum. I serve on the board of directors. And I've also involved with organizing efforts, including the United Musicians and Allied Workers. So just to tell you a little bit about my organization, Campfire Music Foundation, again, it came out of a final project at Georgetown University in my sophomore year. The final project was to create a business idea that addresses structural issues in the music industry. Obviously, the first structural issue that jumped out to me was the lack of fair pay for recorded music. So I kind of dived right into this work after that class and have spent the past 4 years developing a nonprofit called Campfire Music Foundation. And our mission is to advance art, music, education, and a creative interest in musicians by lowering the technological, monetary, and educational barriers to success in the music industry, specifically through public benefit technology. So what does that mean? Well, the work that so many of us do today is for the public benefit, right? When it comes to technology, there's not a ton of technology that serves the public benefit. So I'm here to talk about that tonight. Specifically, our first project, Campfire, and our flagship project is developing a nonprofit public benefit music streaming service that, first of all, pays artists and indie rights holders fairly. What a terrible idea. Provides authentic music discovery for fans, and serves local communities and brings leadership in the streaming market. So in the same way that the City of London provides examples for economic regional development in the arts scene here, Campfire aims to be a leader in the streaming space. So before I tell you a little more about our model, let's just examine how streaming exploits artists and independent labels. Again, looking at this from a high perspective, the issue isn't the technology itself, it's how the economics are organized and how the power structures are organized. So for example, recommendation algorithms and shuffle, independent artists and labels are less likely to be put on editorial playlists and shuffle, or when they are, they often accept a lower royalty rate for placement on those, which is essentially a modern day form of payola. And again, when they do break through the algorithm, they often don't receive the same rates that the majors do. So it's estimated that over 70% of every Spotify subscription goes to the big three. That is not accurate of listening habits, but it represents a control structure that, since the digital music revolution, these major players have been able to enact. So again, major labels with ownership stakes in streaming see any payouts as an expense to minimize their bottom line. Paying out artists and paying out independent rights holders will always impact their bottom line. And as a result, they will often seek to minimize those royalties. For example, just last year, Spotify demonetized all tracks under 1,000 streams, roughly 202 million streams. And just in the past year, it's estimated that has lost independent artists over $47 million in royalties. So when you bring up Spotify, historically, a lot of times people will say, well, the company itself is not profitable, right? They just started turning a profit, but for the past 15 years, they've been operating slightly in the red. This isn't necessarily a problem for Spotify, right? So the three major labels have ownership stakes in this company. They prop up the system with front-end investment for a massive return on their royalties. So the majors aren't making their money off of service profit, right? They're making it off of their equity. It's often pretty clear how the current system of streaming hurts artists, but how does it hurt fans? Well, to start, platforms are not incentivized to improve the user experience. With their total market control, the big four streaming platforms have really no incentive to create a more authentic or more meaningful listening experience for fans. For example, a lack of in-app connection with artists and fellow fans. As an artist, to interact with your audience, you often have to go outside of these platforms where your fans are listening to your music. For example, you have to go on Instagram, you have to go through your newsletter. It's very difficult to interact with your audience directly through these platforms. In addition, while these platforms are selling listener data to third-party advertisers, artists have no way to see who's listening to their music and contact them, right? It could be as easy as a fan opting in to give their favorite artist their email address, but there's currently no functionality for that. And again, algorithms and shuffle are profit first, music discovery second. So consumer choice is often an illusion when it comes to streaming platforms. And what I mean by that is there's really no way for you to get your money to the artists you listen to. For example, if you think about, local farms, and if you wanted to support local grocers, you can go, there are mechanisms within most local communities to buy more direct from farmers. Using that analogy in the music industry, there's Bandcamp, and then there's going to see shows and buying merch. But in terms of the actual reported music they're streaming, there's no way as a consumer to choose for more of your subscription to go to the artists you listen to. Again, your money is not going to the artists you listen to. It's estimated 70% of every streaming subscription on major platforms goes to the big three. Streaming encourages passive listening and isolation, weakening local music communities and the connection between artists and fans, devaluing culture. Again, data is being sold. These companies that run the music industry are no longer music companies. In the case of Spotify, they're an audio company. In the case of the rest, they're tech companies. A large part of their revenue comes from selling listener data. They are not required to report that. They report their subscription revenue and their ad revenue from ads on the platform. They do not disclose how much they make from selling your data. And it's like in the law. In addition, AI artists are being uploaded to major platforms more and more often. It's estimated right now that 28% of all songs uploaded every day are fully AI generated. So, for example, how many do you know who Paul Chambers is? Raise your hand. A couple? Okay, great. Paul Chambers was one of the founders of upright jazz bass playing. He died in the 60s. And I'll just give you an example of what his music sounds like. And a couple months ago, I was listening to my new music discovery playlist. I use Apple Music. and I came across this song that was recommended to me, and let's take a listen. So obviously I saw Paul Chambers on the name after I started listening to it, and this is very clearly not Paul Chambers and been dead for 60 years. And what the majors in collusion with streaming platforms. This isn't just on Apple Music or just on Spotify. This is on all platforms. You can find it on YouTube. So what this is an effort by major labels who own or have owned in the past rights to prominent artists, and they're taking these dead artists whose estates are often, they don't exist anymore. They have no legal recourse. Paul Chinga's family, they don't own, there's no estate, there's no legal recourse that they can use. So the majors are going in, uploading AI music under the name of dead artists, and pushing it directly to fans. So this happened with Blaze Foley. He's a little more popular than Paul Chambers, country artist. His fans noticed right away, and Blaze Foley's estate is big enough where they did file action against Spotify and have it taken down. But for artists who are dead and their estates no longer exist, this is just a blatant ripoff of their creative value, and it's pretty shameless. So if you're a major label, right, and you look back at the past 20 to 30 years of the digital music revolution. I mean, I was born in 2001, so I'm speaking to a room of people who actually lived through this transformation for the most part. And what you saw was there was a new technological advancement in streaming. And from there, obviously the piracy battle needed a solution. But the solution that was implemented was one that just serves major corporate interests, right? So the major labels 20, 30 years ago saw Napster and other early stage streaming platforms, and they said, hey, you're stealing from artists. That's our job. So, and now there's this same pattern is repeating itself. So they sued the shit out of those early streaming startups and established structure that they had ownership of. And the same thing is repeating itself. So with AI, with this new technological advancement. So in 2024, the major labels came out with a lawsuit against Suno and Udio. Those are AI music generation softwares. They were trading their data on major label music, and so they got sued. And a year later, as you can see in the bottom headline, Universal, Sony, and Warner negotiate with Suno and Udio. So they pretty much just came out and for the streaming revolution, it took 10 years of lawsuits before they established their own structure. With AI, it's happening on a much shorter timeline. So it's a real risk. The goal for them, as always, is to extract the most value from human labor as possible. And we've gotten to the point where they can take human labor out of the equation entirely. And these people are thieves, right? Like, it's easy to say, like, oh, the corporate structures of America there's a defense to them, which there is in a lot of cases. But with this is just stealing people's work. And if you did this to the majors, as in, you would get sued. Artists have no recourse and very little legal methods to protect their own work. So that was kind of examining the issues. Before I get into what Campfire is doing to work on this, I'll just give you an example of some of the work that we do with artists. We are a public benefit nonprofit organization. So in addition to developing a public benefit streaming platform, we're on the ground level interviewing artists and community stakeholders around what they're seeing.
Like, money from streaming was like, no.
Yeah.
It's non-existent, really.
Like, when it comes to producing my music, and releasing and the money that I get from streams, it's not at all financially viable or supportive in how I feel that I should be valued. And I feel that most artists also feel that way that I'm in connection with.
Remember for years, and I think to this day, the perception of a lot of people thought Doom Tree was like rich, like we lived in mansions, and we were like, I remember when one of the artists was bar backing in the winter when we weren't touring a lot, just to like kind of cover extra money, and then one of the stop because the amount of people would come in and just be like, dude, what are you doing here? Like, why are you bartending? It's like, because I need to make money, man. I'm not, like, I can't retire off this.
I used to make more money actually, but the fees have stayed the same and the expenses have gone up. So, like I said, I used to tour with a tour manager and one extra event, but there's no more money for that.
I'm not saying anybody needs to be mega rich, but like you should be able to live. I've had people be like, "Oh my God, you're doing shit on the star." I was like, "Yeah." If the music is serious enough to get you through whatever low down shit you're going through, if music is serious enough to accompany you in the highest moments of your life, if music is serious enough for it to accompany you through your just mundane days, should that not be a serious enough profession that a bitch can do that and only that and live?
So I feel very fortunate that I get to work with so many amazing artists and amazing individuals. Like you just saw in that clip, most of those artists were from the Twin Cities, which is a very incredible local music community. So how do we approach a solution? Well, first, we got to recognize that we will never get the current system to compensate us fairly. In addition, and certainly in the United States, there is no government solution to streaming. Regulation, even if it were to happen, would only make a minor dent in how these companies operate. Specifically, Spotify is not in the US. Again, it comes back to the fact that the technology of streaming is great. Like, as a consumer, the fact that you can listen to any music in recorded history at the touch of your fingertips is incredible. And the technology shouldn't go away, and we should lean into that. The problem, again, is the economic model that sets the foundation for streaming. In my opinion, the only way this will change is by building a new system, a new model, specifically in the platform. Again, we can't expect these major corporations to ever prioritize independent rights holders or independent artists. And we need to change. We need to build change from the ground up. So what does a new system look like? In my opinion, it looks like a public benefit model aligned with the principles that we are all here to discuss today and that so many of us spend our lives around, which is workforce development, market democratization, and engagement with youth and local music communities. We need to create a revenue pie entirely separate from major label systems, one that is able to return royalties directly to those who create them. What we need and what a lot of people are calling for and have been calling for since before streaming even started, since the history of the music industry, people are calling for a model that centers the value of artists, their work, and their fans before anything else. So what does our model look like? The model that we're building? Well, it's a fully independent nonprofit model. So one of the first things I realized when trying to approach this issue is if you take VC money at venture capital money as a streaming platform, it's almost impossible to remain independent. And that's why we established ourselves as a 501c3 nonprofit. That was 3 years ago. And since then, we've been building out the organization, building out our coalition, and breaking ground on app development. There's no equity, there's no shareholders. All revenue generated by the platform would go, after Campfire takes a cut for operations, it would go directly back to the rights holders. Specifically, as a user, subscription price would start at $5 a month. Name your price with the low barrier to entry. You can name your price to $50, $60, $70, $100, however much you want to support. And you can do that with the knowledge that your money will go back specifically only to the artist that you listen to. So if you listen to an artist for 50% of your month, right, then that artist would get 50% of the subscription fee that you name. After Campfire takes 20% for operations compared to 30%, which is the standard right now. Again, algorithms would be music discovery first, with no profit incentive. There would be no certain rights holders that get preferential treatment. For fans, social functionality, user dashboards, ways to create an identity in the app around the music you listen to and to share that identity. Connections to local music communities. So imagine if Spotify was generating economic impact for the local communities that is on its platform, right? It would be incredible. Really grounding this project in, again, the ideals that so many of us are here to talk about today, which is how do we develop sustainable structures and how do we develop an ecosystem and infrastructure around that ecosystem to create a long-term solution. On Campfire, we will directly license with artists themselves or from independent labels on a case-by-case basis. So no major label music, and no fully AI music. So that means mechanisms to verify that if you're uploading, you are a real person or a group of people. If you want to use AI as a tool in your process, that's okay. But the act and the individual needs to come from a real person, right? On Campfire, we would still work with publishers. We would pay out publishing royalties in the same way that current platforms do, which is about 15% of all subscription revenue. And we would encourage artists on Campfire to go collect those publishing royalties. So yeah, sustainable royalty engine, user set subscription, 20% operating share, direct payouts to rights holders, and compliant reporting to existing structures. And again, like when I started this project, if you built a streaming platform that paid more and paid more transparently, but all the rights holders were still the majors, it wouldn't create much of an economic impact, especially considering that they would demand a preferable rate. So that's why we're going to choose to work with artists who own their own rights, which is increasingly more common, or from independent labels on a case-by-case basis. So here's just a quick overview of our prototype. If you want to take a look at it on your phone, feel free to do so. We're going to implement technology that allows for hyperlocal music discovery, so filtering by state, by city, by college campus, getting to discover music in your local area. For example, on Campfire, there could be a London community where you go in and see all artists that are creating music in London, and you get to discover a experience that reflects the actual physical experience that's going on in that community. In addition, a royalty breakdown, so you get to see where your money goes based on your listening habits. Where are we at? So we spent the past 2 years really focused on developing our skills. Again, I'm only 24. My whole team is also young, recent college graduates. We're fortunate to have a ton of really strong advisors and mentors. Folks like Michael Bracey from the Music Policy Forum, we already mentioned. And then some really fantastic artists, including Brendan Canty from Fugazi, who has been a great mentor of mine. Sontergold, Tommy Stinson from The Replacements, Melvin Gibbs from the Rollins Band, and among others, and Surreal Iggy, who you saw in that clip talking about touring. We are actively fundraising. We recently broke ground on a multi-year $3 million capital campaign. We fundraised $100,000 over the past 3 years, 70 of which came within the past 2 months. And we're developing our beta app. So we are planning to start testing within local communities next year and launching within certain markets first and scaling from there. We also have the support of some great organizations. Again, this project was started at Georgetown University and we've received funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, among others. We've been fortunate to work directly with public media groups such as PASP, and really in the Brooklyn Rail, among others. And so again, I feel very fortunate as a young person in this space to get to learn from all of these organizations, get to learn from people like yourselves. And I encourage you to give the youth in your networks the same opportunities that were given to me. So yeah, just to wrap up here, what does building Campfire look like? It's making a place that gives artists a context for their value and creating a fan experience that's rooted in music discovery and the true value of music. The name Campfire, we chose it as a symbol of returning to music's roots around the campfire community and connection. Again, launching pilot music communities. And rather than competing with major platforms on their terms, we're creating something fundamentally different, a community-powered alternative that treats artists as stakeholders and not content suppliers. In addition, not competing with majors on their terms means that we will not go through distributor pipelines. Campfire will not be a destination for major distributors. We will have to implement processes that make it easy for artists to upload their music. But when you become a destination for a music distributor, you have to give each distribution platform an upfront fee and a cut of royalties. So we don't want to lock ourselves into these structures that, for the most part, exploit rather than serve. It looks like building Campfire looks like a movement of artists, indie labels, and art stores and fans at ideally a scale never seen before, building music revolution that people want to be a part of. This is one of the biggest issues that artists in the independent music community has ever faced. So let's organize it like it, and let's build a widespread movement of change. And just to tie this back into the values of the conference, building Campfire looks like continued education, advocacy, and large-scale awareness, capturing independent markets, starting at the ground level, and ideally starting at that ground level and toppling the whole thing from the bottom. Orchestrating two-sided adoption, onboarding independent artists and labels at scale, while activating value-aligned listeners through artist-led campaigns and city-by-city launches. And really providing an example that it's possible to build technology at scale without taking advantage of consumers. I think for a long time, the interests of consumers and the profit interests of technology were more or less aligned. When you think about just the development of computers, of mobile phones, of internet, a lot of these things were what consumers wanted, and they were in the interest of consumers. Within the past 10 years, I would argue, those things have kind of split. The interest of consumers and innovation for consumers no longer aligns with profit incentives. So what if we started over to answer the question I posed at the beginning? We could create circular systems of sustainability at scale, serving music communities and generating direct economic impact for local artists. We could create new music. Imagine what music might sound like in 15, 20 years, artists who aren't even born yet, right? Better practices for a better future of music. We could have a chance to create transformational change and solve problems in new ways. Again, it's not the technology that's the issue. It's how the technology is organized. The technology actually presents an opportunity for these issues to be solved. So if anyone is interested in updates, feel free to sign up for our waitlist here. I encourage you to do so. And thank you all again so much for your attention and for listening. I'm not trying to convince you to leave Spotify or leave major streaming platforms. I use Apple Music. It's hard not to. I'm not even trying to convince you that Campfire is the solution, but I hope that I've engaged you on what a solution might look like and how we could organize and think about a better model. So, thank you.